Hey everyone, it's the Creepy Fox here. I'm back with another Scary Stories video for you guys. Now, I know it's been a while since I last uploaded a Scary Stories video. Gosh, how long has it been? I want to say since April or so. If you guys didn't see the previous video I uploaded, I uploaded a video last month. Apparently it didn't get sent out to subscription boxes because I saw such a low view count on that. But basically I went over what happened. A short summary, I ended up having to deal with a giant cell tumor and I had to get a total knee replacement and I was in the hospital for over a month. You get the idea. But I'm back here with another Scary Stories video because again, I know it's been such a long time. But anyways, I go more into detail in the pinned comments so you can kind of check that out for yourself. One thing I did want to mention that was kind of important is that I haven't been getting any subscriber stories from you guys. That's also another reason why there's been such a long delay in uploads. Yes, I'm still recovering. Yes, I was in the hospital. But the biggest thing is the fact that, I haven't been getting subscriber stories. And as you guys know, I don't like to go on Reddit. I don't like to go on Let's Not Meet. And I don't like to read stories from there because it's just going to cause the issue of repeat stories. And you're going to hear the same stories on multiple channels. So please make sure that if you do have a story to send in, you do send it in so we can make sure we keep going with the Creepy Fox podcast and there's not such a long delay in uploads. But anyways, I've been rambling for a long while here. Let's go ahead and get started and I hope you guys enjoy. It was winter break in the early 1990s. I was doing my yearly trip to visit family who lived a few hours away in Sydney. Now, before I get any farther, let me explain some things. I was a junior in college, and for the past couple of years, I would make the trip to and from university to go and visit my mom and dad. This usually had me going through miles upon miles of empty desert lands that seemed to go on for an eternity. You did have your occasional rest stop and convenience store here and there, but for the most part, the roads were pretty empty. So, back to where I was. Seeing as I wanted to get to my family bright and early in the morning, I'd left my house around 2 a.m., and with my McDonald's in one hand and some AC/DC playing on the radio, I was in the middle of my trip. Well, seeing as I had a little too much Dr. Pepper, my body was telling me, hey, you need to stop and take care of this, otherwise things aren't going to end too well. I tried my best to hold it in, seeing as I was now less than an hour away. But of course, between the squeezing and the sweating, I knew I had to let go, so to say. So I'm looking for any place I could possibly stop at, and luckily I'm able to see a sign for a rest area a few kilometers from me. I exit and begin heading down a dirt road that has me pulling up to this abandoned rest stop. At least, I thought it was abandoned. There was one little light and a bunch of debris everywhere, but one thing was for sure. I didn't see any vehicles. Cool, I could just go into the washroom, take care of what I needed to take care of, and then book it to my parents' house. However, this wouldn't be a scary story without something scary happening. So I head into the washroom and take a seat to take care of my business. As I sat there for the next 20 to 30 seconds, I ended up hearing what sounds like someone screaming. Now, this isn't just your normal screaming. It sounded like someone needed help. But then to make things worse, the screaming ends as a loud pop is heard, like from a gunshot. I froze, fearing the worst, and I would later find out on the TV a few days later just exactly what happened. I'll get to that in a moment. So after sitting in the stall for about 2 minutes, I could hear footsteps on the dirt slowly approaching the building. Remember, I'm in the middle of nowhere and it's 4 in the morning. By now there might be some possible maniac out here just who, quite frankly, ended someone. Well, the footsteps get even closer and now they're echoing inside the washroom. Now I guess I forgot to mention, but the other washroom was locked, so now this person was in here with me. I was so nervous, hoping whoever had come in here wouldn't check inside the stalls. If whoever was out here found me, that was going to be it. Quite the opposite. I hear the sound of the faucet, as it sounds like someone is trying to wash something off their clothes. Curiosity started to get to me. and I very cautiously take a peek through the little opening of the stall while doing all I could to remain quiet. There is someone in a black hoodie throwing water on themselves. Finally, this person gets up and leaves, and I hear the sound of a car speeding away. After waiting 20 minutes, I exit the stall and I could see some red stains. Fearing the worst, I book it to my car, where luckily he wasn't waiting for me. I'm guessing he hadn't seen my vehicle, seeing as it was dark blue and hidden behind some shrubbery, and of course, the darkness of the night. As I drove to my parents' house, all I could think about was what I had just heard and witnessed. But there had to be an explanation, right? Sure enough, there was, because a couple of nights later on the news, there was a story about a couple. The boyfriend and girlfriend had gotten into a bad fight, and the boyfriend ended up taking her out to the middle of nowhere. That's when I come into play. I had heard the aftermath, as they ended up finding what remained a few days later. The boyfriend later confessed and was eventually charged with murder. That was all those many years ago, and last I heard, he's still serving time, and he'll remain there for the rest of his life. This past March, I was taking a road trip to visit family in southern Louisiana. It was just myself on this road trip, and I'd be driving from my small town in North Carolina. Now, I had driven down to visit them in the past before, but unlike times prior, I decided to take a more scenic route that would have me driving further through the countryside. It would add an extra day, but I told myself it was worth it. By the way, it wasn't worth it with what I had to go through, and that's what this story is about. So, one afternoon, after some grub with friends, I leave the house and begin my journey. Now, I don't mean to make myself out as this amazing super driver, but I can usually drive for hours at a time and not have to make any sort of rest stop. However, since I knew this road trip was going to take me longer than usual, I made it a necessity to stop to take some breaks and stretch. After all, you can be an excellent driver, but if you're sitting around for that long without getting some steps in, you're going to have back pain and leg pains that you're going to regret. And besides, I'm this sort of girl who needs her coffee, so stops at convenience stores were a necessity. Now, for anyone who has traveled through the Deep South, you know how secluded rest stops and visitor areas can be. But don't get me started with the roads and the highways. There are points you'll travel for hours, and you might just see a couple of cars, especially when you're going into the more mountainous parts of the country. These areas also have bad phone reception, which would make this experience that much worse. Well, on the second day of traveling, it was around 2 in the morning, and I was somewhere in Mississippi. I had seen a sign for a rest area about 20 miles from my current location. It showed there was a rest area with restrooms and a Shell gas station. Sweet. I could use this opportunity to stretch, grab some snacks, and use the restroom. Here's the thing. When I arrived at the Shell gas station, it was abandoned. From what I read up on later, it had closed just a few months prior and had moved locations. Well, that was a bummer. Thankfully, the restrooms were still open at the nearby rest area, so I head over there. First thing before I get out of my car is I check my surroundings. The coast looked clear, so I enter the restroom and start to do my thing. I then hear the sound of car tires disturbing the dirt and the gravel outside. Moments later, I hear the sound of a car door closing and footsteps approaching the restrooms. Now, I'll admit, if this wasn't the point, I started to get paranoid. Remember, it's 2 in the morning, and I'm in the middle of nowhere inside this little stall. At this point in the night, the last car I'd seen was an hour ago. So I listen in, but I never hear the footsteps enter. So I assumed it was a man who went to the other side. Whatever. But to relieve my stress, I end up waiting until I hear the car leave. 3 minutes pass by, and nothing. Then 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Still no sound of a car leaving. Could it have been someone was going to camp out here? I mean, it was possible. So it's not like I could camp it out inside the little stall myself. I finally tell myself I'm making a huge deal of this and I exit. When I do, I see there is a pickup truck parked about 20 feet from my car. Then next to it I can see what looks like a man in a dark blue hoodie with his back turned toward me. He appears to be doing something with my window, so I questioned him. "Excuse me, but did you see something wrong with my car? What's the deal?" He then turns around and reveals this huge, large knife. I got spooked because this guy was not only armed, but he was huge. I would describe him from my best memory as a man in his early 40s, weighing around 280 pounds, about 6'2". He now claims that he worked with the towing company and he needed to get inside my car to start it. I knew that this was an obvious lie, but I think it was the first thing that came to his mind as I had caught him red-handed. I tell him he needs to leave. This only seems to pique his interest. He starts to look me up and down for about 10 seconds, and then says, "You know what? A beautiful girl like you might be able to help me out with something else I need taken care of." I knew where this was going, but I'm trapped. I'm in the middle of nowhere. This guy has a knife. Where do I go? My phone had no reception, so it's not like I could call anyone. Even if I did, by the time they got there, I was already a goner. All I had to use were my car keys, so I take them out of my pocket, and that's when silly me sees it. I had forgotten I had pepper spray attached to my car keys. Why I didn't think about this before was beyond me, but I guess in the panic, I had forgotten. So I grab the pepper spray as he begins to approach me. Once he was within range, bam, I spray him right in the face as he steps back screaming in rage. He begins swiping in all directions, and I dodge out of the way as he tried looking for me. With enough distance between myself and this creep, I unlock the door with my key button and pretty much dive inside. I turn my car on, and I get the heck out of there. The last thing I saw was him getting into his car, but he never did catch up to me. I drive about 30 minutes, shaking from fear, and after what seemed like an eternity, I'm able to see a highway patrolman parked to the side of the road. I stop and grab his attention, and then describe the incident that had taken place. He then tells me he would go check the rest stop, but of course I never found out if they found him or not. To think, had I not had the pepper spray with me, I probably would have been a goner. The job of a truck driver is probably one of the most misunderstood lines of work in America. Most people take it as a job where you make a lot of money and just drive. In a way, yeah, that's how it works. But to the naysayers, understand that it's a lot more than just getting behind the wheel. For starters, you've got to learn how to drive a big rig. Second, you've got to grow accustomed to long hours of sitting on your rear end and staring at empty roads at 3 in the morning. And third, there's the constant lower back pains. Sound appealing? Well, add on top a rigorous schedule, and hello, welcome to Driving Big Rigs 101. I'll be your guide. Sorry, I don't mean to complain. I just get tired of hearing from people who give truck drivers a hard time. With that out of the way, I have something to share regarding a creepy encounter I had when I used to drive trucks in the early 2000s. At the time, I was working for a private company my uncle owned, who shipped gravel and coal to major construction sites. It was a pretty messy job, but it paid $40 an hour, so I thought why not, especially considering most people my age, I was in my late 20s when this occurred, were stuck at dead-end jobs making an average of $7.50. Anyways, I was driving somewhere in the Midwest, and I recall I'd pulled an all-nighter after getting delayed due to a sudden blizzard. That's why I was fueling myself with a bunch of soda and Big Macs from McDonald's. But like anyone else, I'm not just a living, breathing machine. I too required a break, and with it approaching midnight, I needed that break. Luckily, I'd made up so much ground I was able to earn myself enough time to sleep for a few hours. Unfortunately, the nearest truck stop wasn't for another 100 miles, which meant I would have to find somewhere else to stop and sleep. I despised stopping at the side of the highway, by the way, due to the dangers that come with it. Well, In my quest to find a comfy sleeping location, I spot a sign for a rest area in less than 25 miles. It was no truck stop, but hey, it's better than nothing. So I power through the last bit listening to some heavy metal, and I arrived at the rest area only to see the rest stop had been abandoned. The building which housed the restrooms had been boarded up, and the only sign of life I would find were the ravens squawking and flying around me, almost as if they were mocking me. So much for using the restroom. That didn't stop me from walking into the nearby wilderness and peeing there. Anyways, fast forward no more than 3 hours later, and I began to hear someone knocking. As I was so deep into my slumber, I first thought perhaps it might have been my imagination. But after a minute or two of knocking persisting, I slowly started to open my eyes. What I see staring back at me in the passenger side window was a man, mid-30s. He was wearing a baseball cap and had a bandana covering the lower half of his face. Those eyes, let me just tell you, those were the eyes of a maniac. He began pounding at the glass, telling me to get out and hand over the keys, or as I remember him saying, he was going to kill me. I would soon get confirmation of his intentions when he revealed he's got a gun. "Get out right now. I'm not playing any games with you," I could hear him say through the muffled glass. Ah yes, this was now turning into quite the scary and serious predicament. So you might be wondering, how in the world did I get out of this situation? Easy. I had a double-barreled shotgun concealed under my seat, but I couldn't just take it out. If I did, that was the end of me. Instead, I tell him I was going to get the keys and my wallet, hoping this could be a perfect excuse for me reaching under my seat. It worked. While I kept my eyes on this creep, I see him lower his gun for just enough time for me to grab the double barrel and point that bad boy right at him. You should have seen that confidence in his eyes suddenly disappear. Just as I was about to fire, he jumps off of the truck and books it to a nearby vehicle. That's where I could see another person wearing a mask, who I assumed was the lookout. They drove out of there, never to be seen again. Now, I can't say for sure what exactly they were planning. Just by the situation itself, they were probably looking to steal my big rig. But what about after? Would they have really let me go? Or would they have taken advantage of us being in the middle of nowhere and silenced me for good? It's a creepy thought that all these years later still keeps me up at night. This encounter was pretty interesting, that it proves you don't have to be home alone or out walking out by yourself to have something creepy or scary happen. This was last Thanksgiving, and myself and my older brother were driving back from a Thanksgiving party. I'm female, 22 years old by the way. Anyways, we were driving from Anchorage and heading to our home in Seward. To get to our home, you have to take Alaska State 1, and then drive up into the mountains. Now, considering how dark it becomes after like 3 or 4 p.m., the only light source we had came from our car headlights. Occasionally, you would see another vehicle drive by, but in the area in which we were at, this was very rare. Maybe every 20 minutes you'd see something. So it all began at this lonely little rest stop. With so much food being consumed, my brother really had to go badly. We arrived. My brother heads into the restroom, and I stay in the car with the heater on. Knowing my brother, I knew we were going to be out here for quite some time. So I pull the seat back, place my feet on the dashboard, and close my eyes to the sounds of tunes coming from our iPod. It must have been a good 15 solid minutes when I happened to be awoken by headlights shining through the back window. It was what looked to be like a large silver Toyota Tundra. The vehicle, of all spots, chooses to park directly next to mine. Annoyed, I took a look at the driver, and he looked gigantic. He had a huge, large, scruffy beard and a beanie. He sort of looked like Santa Claus. However, this random man wasn't in any jolly mood, at least from what I could tell. He sort of just stares at me for a solid 20 seconds before finally heading into the restroom. He comes back a minute later as I'm looking at my phone, and then I hear him knock at my window. I looked up, and he's got this really creepy smile. "What do you want?" I tell him, slightly annoyed. "I just saw you. You're really cute. Are you waiting for your boyfriend or something?" "No, I'm waiting for my brother. What about it?" I tried to act as intimidating as I could, even though I wasn't fooling him. "Well, if you're cold, I can always wait in there with you, or you can come right along with me." I tell him I wasn't interested, but he keeps insisting I open the door. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, my brother steps out of the restroom, and he immediately walks over with a look of confusion. "Excuse me, sir, was there something you needed?" "No, I was just checking up on her. I'm on my way." He drives off, and I tell my brother about the strange man. He says that if he comes back and gives us any problems, he would make sure he didn't bother us ever again. By the way, my brother has a license to carry, but I couldn't use the pistol because he had taken it with him to the restroom. Anyways, this story isn't over just yet. Fast forward maybe about 10 or so minutes, and we've reached a part of the mountains with absolutely no cell phone service. We hadn't seen any vehicles too since the creep of the rest stop, and we were starting to think the rest of the night would go smoothly. Well, out of nowhere, however, we jumped out of our seats, surprised, when a pair of headlights are blinding my brother and I. A vehicle was parked in the middle of the road just up ahead of us. My brother slams on the brakes as our car slowly skates toward this vehicle, just missing it by a few inches. While we were shocked that we had almost just driven over the canyon and almost crashed, what surprised us even more was the vehicle looked very familiar. It's the same silver Toyota Tundra which contained the creep from the rest stop. This is confirmed when the Toyota's driver door opens and the guy from earlier steps out onto the snow. But he has a surprise, what looks to be like a hunting rifle. We were shocked as he begins to demand we both get out of the vehicle, otherwise he would take a shot at the front window. I'll tell you this. There was no way we were getting out of our car. So here's what happened. My brother pulls down the window and tells him we would get out. The creep then puts the rifle down for just a brief second. Then my brother whispers I take cover. My brother then steps on the gas, almost hitting the dude, and we fooled him, but that's not before he actually takes aim and manages to fire a round at the back of our bumper. Both of us were super frightened, but we eventually are able to lose him when we drive off of the road, and then hide behind some trees with the lights off. He drives past us. Then we must have waited there for about 20 or so minutes before we decided to leave. We never saw him again, and to this day, we question exactly what his motives truly were. As I write this story and prepare to share it with everyone, I'm reminded of the good old days, back in the 1980s, and being a teenager. It was a time when the Nintendo Entertainment System was just beginning to win over the hearts of America, and Saturday morning cartoons were a weekly tradition. How I remember, even as a senior in high school, getting up every morning, excited for another day. I really miss it, and looking back, I'm jealous of you young ones, but I'm not really here to reminisce about those times. Instead, I wanted to go ahead and share one of my creepy experiences with the creepy fox from this time period, since I'm a huge fan of this sort of thing. I remember it very clearly. Senior year of high school, just a month before graduation. My high school sweetheart Nicole and I were planning a celebration of sorts, a way to welcome in our new chapter of life. But how could we do that? Bingo, a road trip across the United States, a chance to see some of the greatest sights imaginable. No longer were we going to be held back by just seeing places in a book or an article. We were going to become the book ourselves, and the article too, and see the world. Therefore, the plan was set. And just a week after we graduated for the class of 1987, we packed our things into my Volkswagen Type 2, and we began our journey. We started from Southern California, and we slowly made our way east. Our first stop was the Grand Canyon, and we spent a couple of nights backpacking, watching the stars in the evening, and sitting around a campfire. From there, we visited Mount Rushmore, Yellowstone National Park, and then the Great Lakes of Michigan. It was on our way south, heading toward Florida, where we would encounter something utterly, and quite frankly, frightening. It was in the late evening, I want to say around midnight, and my eyes were becoming heavy. I tried desperately to keep awake with some gas station coffee I'd bought, but apart from it getting cold, and the lack of radio signal, and girlfriend sleeping in the passenger seat, I was on the lookout for a rest area. I thought we were going to have to camp in the middle of nowhere, but luckily I saw a sign for a rest area, just outside of a town called Madison. Finally, out of the countryside, I could see the illumination of buildings, no more than 5 miles from my current location. Before I knew it, there were homes on each side of the road, and I could finally relax thinking we were in civilization. I went ahead and pulled into a gas station with a small parking lot just behind the building. There was just one other vehicle which was parked in the front of the gas station. Most likely it belonged to the current cashier on duty. Anyways, it looked pretty quiet, albeit a bit spooky with the bad lighting. So I went ahead and parked, then woke up my girlfriend, telling her something like, "Hey Nicole, just letting you know we made it into town. There's a gas station here if you need to use the restroom." We then get out of our Volkswagen and make the 10-second walk over to the building, lights flashing on and off from the old lights above the gas station. We were greeted by the gas station attendant, who surprisingly was pretty friendly. He let us choose any free snacks we wanted. Man, how I miss those times when people were so kind to you. Just your presence alone makes their day. Best part about small towns, I guess. Looking back, I think he just wanted someone to talk to. He looked like he could have been my grandpa in his late 50s. We talked to him for about 10 minutes as I chowed down on a hot dog. At this point, my girlfriend had already went to the restroom and returned to the car to sleep. "Hey, do you mind if I use the restroom?" I asked him, not being able to hold it in from all the coffee and water from the evening. He agrees and returns to watching the random soap opera that was playing on his small staticky television. I must have sat in that restroom for no more than 5 minutes, admiring the silly bathroom graffiti, when I ended up hearing an argument. I listened in and I could hear the key words, money, and gun. I knew it was too real to be coming from the TV, so I finished up and go to wash my hands. I'm jolted to a sudden full attention when I hear a loud gunshot, followed by glass shattering, and followed by my girlfriend screaming. What was happening? I thought about my girlfriend and quickly rushed out of the restroom, which was at the very back of the store. I couldn't believe my eyes. Standing in front of the cashier were 2 men in all black wearing ski masks with pistols. Glass from the front window was completely shattered. But that wasn't all. My girlfriend stood there with her hands up, next to one of these robbers. What could I do? If I tried saying something, anything, or running up to them, that was going to be it for me. I remember time froze and I stood there helpless, desperately holding back tears, thinking these 2 might be after more than just money. Now, up to this point, I hadn't yet been spotted. I was using the cover of some of the aisles and looking through the chips and various other assortments of goodies. As the 2 men take money from the cash register, they then demand my girlfriend to hand over any money she had. She wasted no time giving the 2 the little cash she had with her. Then they run out of the store. Wow, what a sight. My girlfriend runs over to the cashier, who at this point had taken out a shotgun from under the front desk out of self-defense. I walked over to them, calling Nicole's name, and she comes to hug me while she starts to cry. Nicole told me she came back into the store to grab some tissues for her runny nose. That's when these 2 stormed in demanding money. Anyways, the gas station attendant called the police while he told us to wait in the back room. He was honestly our hero. At any time, those 2 armed masked men could have come back and finished us off. Yet he stood out there making sure we were safe. Officers ended up questioning all 3 of us, and after about 25 minutes, we were finally able to return to our vehicle. However, we ended up heading to a Motel 6, where we spent the rest of that morning sleeping. That was all. We never did find out if those two were caught, but either way, it didn't stop us from reaching Miami, where we spent the next week swimming in the ocean, soaking in the sun, and trying to forget that traumatic experience. Back in the late 1990s, I was driving back home after spending spring break with my family. It's about a 7-hour drive through the countryside that has you go without seeing towns or people for hours at a time. I was on this long stretch of road, and I suddenly got the urge to use the restroom. Sadly, the nearest rest stop wasn't for another 20 miles, so I sped up. Eventually, I can see the exit and waste little time taking care of my business. But here's the thing. When I got into the rest stop, it was around 1 in the morning, and there were no other vehicles. As I'm washing my hands, I hear the sound of a car pulling up on the gravel, and seconds later I hear a car door open. Thinking nothing of it, I go to dry my hands and step out. And once I'm out, I'm faced with this large man I'd never seen before. I want to describe him as about 6'4", 270 pounds with dirty old clothing, and a ski mask. "Excuse me, sir, just trying to get in my car." "Wait, hold on a minute. Where are you going?" "What's your name? I just want to know something." "It's Emily." "Now what is it?" "Hey there, Emily. Are you out here all by yourself?" I didn't answer this question as the creepy tone he gave me led me on to the idea he was up to no good. I said, "Are you out here alone or not? Come back here." He now sounded flustered as I step into my vehicle and I begin to start it. He reaches for the door and then tries to open it. "You're in a lot of trouble there, girl. Go ahead and open the door." He then reaches into his jacket pocket and I see what looks like a gun. My dad is a police officer. It looked exactly like the one he has. I floored it, accidentally hitting his foot. Good, he deserved it. But as I start to drive away, I hear loud gunshots making their way toward me. You can imagine my heart is racing 1,000,000 miles an hour, thinking just how crazy this entire situation was. However, it was about to get a lot crazier. About 3 minutes later, I'm able to see headlights in my rearview mirror. They begin flashing on and off, indicating they wanted me to pull over, but that wasn't going to happen. Well, during one of the moments where the lights dim, I'm able to see the vehicle more clearly. It looks exactly like the dark blue SUV from the rest stop, the same one where the creepy dude had shown up in. What happens next is him chasing me for 5 minutes, trying to get me to pull over. At one point he even bumps into the back, causing me to almost lose control and crash. Now remember, this is back in the 90s and there's no cell phones, and there's no way for me to call for help or the police. My best bet was either find an exit or find other vehicles, whichever of the two came first. Luckily, I caught my brake, because up ahead I could see a highway patrol officer on the side of the road. I went ahead and went over 100, which caught his attention. This caused Mr. SUV man, as I like to call him, to slow down, and eventually he turned back. When the officer stopped me, I explained everything that had taken place. He didn't believe me at first, until he saw the damage from the bullet holes that were left from the gun. Eventually, more officers did arrive, and we go to the nearby police station, where I filed a report. I never heard back, and I'm not sure what happened to the SUV dude. My question, though, is this. Has anyone else ever had a similar experience? And if so, please let me know. I'll check the comments section. So, thank you. This happened around 15 years ago. I, being the huge wrestling fan I am, had made a 4.5-hour mini road trip to visit my cousin in Las Vegas. He was ordering WrestleMania, thus I couldn't miss out on the action. By the way, I was living in Southern California, Orange County to be specific, but that's not really important to the story. Since WrestleMania was on a Sunday, I ended up leaving Friday night, so that I could spend Saturday catching up with my cousin. Then, of course, Sunday was the show. So along with me, I brought my 8-year-old German Shepherd, Rocky, who used to work with police officers as part of a canine unit. Rocky was the kindest dog you'd ever meet, but with all his training, you wouldn't want to get on his bad side. He could tear you into shreds, literally. That training is what I truly believe saved me. Okay, so once I got off of work, I go and pick up Rocky, and we begin our mini road trip around 8 p.m. Now, since I was pretty tired, I picked up a large coffee at a 7-Eleven to try and keep me awake. Anyone who drinks that much coffee is most likely going to have to use the restroom, and I really tried my best to hold it in, but it got to the point I started sweating and shaking. Thus, I needed to find a rest stop. I saw one, for 5 miles away, and I'm finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. As for the rest stop, it was empty. Now, before exiting, I leave the car door open ever so slightly, so that Rocky could step out and stretch or use the restroom. I didn't really worry about Rocky as he was very well trained. I was able to trust him on his own. Anyways, once done, I head over to a nearby vending machine to buy some Cheetos. While I had my back turned, I heard a man's voice. "Hey, do you happen to have some extra change so I could buy myself something?" Out from seemingly nowhere, a homeless man steps out from the darkness. He looked to be in his mid-40s. Me being the kind person I am, actually ended up buying him some chips, hoping this act of kindness would give me some sort of good karma points. This is when I made the mistake of turning my back, because moments after, I feel something sharp pressed against my sweater. Don't you dare make any sudden movements. Do exactly as I say, and I promise you won't get hurt. Great. This was it. The guy had me in the palm of his hands, and he was starting to push me toward the back of the restrooms. I already knew that this wasn't going to end well, so that's when I say, "Rocky, come here, boy." The man was confused, but it was a risk I had to take. Otherwise, Rocky might have been too late. Suddenly, we heard the sound of barking, and this man gets distracted just long enough for me to run out of the way. Like a bolt of lightning, Rocky pounces on this dude, and the knife falls to the ground. The man then tries to wrestle Rocky off of him, but he's got a really good grasp of his arm. Immediately, I kick the knife out from reaching distance, as all of a sudden headlights appear out of nowhere. It was another family. They, as you probably already guessed, were surprised at the sight they were witnessing, but I was able to get them to help me. In summary, we get officers involved and the man is arrested. I later learned he had quite a history on him. As for the way he acted that evening, it turned out he had quite a lot to drink and was drunk. That would explain the smell in his breath as well as his actions. Now, as for Rocky, he ended up getting a bunch of extra treats and belly rubs that night. Thank you, Rocky. You were the best dog I ever had.